Good morning and happy Wednesday. It is Wednesday, April 29th, and I am making this video for lesson number 9. Before we get to lesson number 9 about infectious agents, I did want to go back. I had a lot of questions from lesson number 8 asking about this activity for the contagious infections. So I wrote it down. I've been starting to make a list of questions that come in to discuss during our Google Meet, which will be later today at 1:30. So this will be on the Google Meet agenda for today to talk about. But I thought I'd just kind of talk through it a little bit now that some of you have seen the activity. So I described it in our last video introduction to lesson number 8, but this was an activity that we did in our class with little test tubes. So everyone had a test tube. All of them had water except for one person had, I think it was hydrogen peroxide, I want to say. And anyways, we walked around the class and then kind of like musical chairs, and I said, stop. And when I said stop, you would find a partner. You and that partner would stand across from each other. You would keep your test tube in your hand, but you would pour your test tube into your partners, swish it around, and then they would pour half back. Basically, you're mixing without trading. And so what you can see here is I asked them to fill out a Google form. So they would write down the name, and then at the end, they filled out a Google form. Who was your first contact, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth? So going across, you can kind of see the confusion came, I think, when I didn't use the whole class data. And so there's some people that you're like, well, where the heck did Caitlin come from? Or where did Christian come from? Or whatever it was. But I basically just took a small sample and then only asked you about the people who you could figure it out on the chart. For example, you can see that like the first two people to mix here were Kristen or Raquel mixed with Kristen. Obviously, you can find Kristen down here, Kristen and Raquel. Isaiah and Ginger, Ginger and Isaiah. Morgan and Hannah, Hannah and Morgan. So you can kind of see right there where they wrote down who they came in contact with. And then at the end, of the activity, I had an indicator. So I took a little dropper around, and the indicator would turn your test tube pink if you were either patient 0 and started with the hydrogen peroxide, or you came in direct contact with patient 0, or, and here's how things can become so contagious and pass through communities and pass through groups of families and groups of friends and churches and things like that, because it's close contact usually. And so if you came in contact with somebody who already came in contact with patient 0, then you were going to turn pink also and show up as infected in the yellow highlighted box. And one of the questions I asked, well, it's very easy, at least I think it's very easy to look and see, okay, there's only 2 people who are every single person they came in contact with turned yellow and was infected, right? Right off the bat, you should be able to see that Morgan and Hannah, every single person that they came in contact with was infected. So that's a big clue of that one of these 2 should be patient 0. And then the other question that kind of made it stand out was, well, why isn't Isaiah infected, right? Because he's not infected, but he mixed with Ginger and mixed with Kristen, who were both infected. Well, you have to kind of follow the pathway, right? This is what contact tracing is all about, is trying to figure out a timeline of when each person came in contact with the infected person. So Isaiah mixed with Ginger and Isaiah mixed with Kristen, but both Kristen and Ginger at the time that they mixed with Isaiah were not infected. They didn't get infected until after. So you should be able to, I didn't pick everybody, but I picked a few that you should be able to figure out who they came in contact with, either tracing forwards or tracing backwards through this chart. So we'll talk about it more at our Google Meet today at 1:30, but hopefully that helped clear up any information. So lesson 9, We split this into two parts. So there's infectious agents part one today, and then part two will be on Friday. So lessons 9 and 10, and this one's pretty straightforward. You're just researching. I think there's 6 or 7 different types of infectious agents, and there is 3 that you're doing in lesson 9. So we have bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So each of those are considered to be an infectious agent and pass, um, can be transmitted from person to person, or maybe through water, or maybe through a host, or whatever it is. So you're answering the same 3 questions for each of the different types of agent. You're asking, how is it transmitted? So is it person to person? Is it through, like, we're talking about COVID right now, and COVID is through the respiratory system mainly, so through saliva and and coughing and touching your face and touching your mouth, and then touching somebody else, or touching something that they've touched, um, and and then touching your own mouth, or whatever it is. So how is it transmitted? Is it through, some can be transmitted through, like, infected water, or contaminated food, or we saw earlier that when we were looking at malaria, it has to go through a host, right? It has to go through the um, the mosquito. And so how is it transmitted, or moving from one person to the other? Um, how does it reproduce? So this one's kind of interesting. Does it reproduce just on its own, like asexually reproduction? Is it binary fission? Does it need a host to reproduce? So how does it reproduce? And then lastly, how is it treated? So if you had a bacterial infection, what would the doctor treat you with? If you have a virus, what would the doctor treat you with? Or a fungus, or fungal infection, what would they give you for treatment? So explain all of those. Um, and let's be careful that I don't have to unsubmit a bunch of these. Don't just type in the question in Google and copy and paste right here. Do not copy and paste information. Read it, think about it, put it in your own words, and type it in complete sentences. No bullet points, no like short phrases. I want it in a complete sentence, from your own brain, please, so I don't have to resubmit. And then this next section for the explain has disease cards. So not as fun as trading cards, but this goes over some of the different diseases. It tells you the name of the disease at top, and then it kind of goes through what we just talked about, the category it is. So bacterial, I'll give you a clue. These are all going to be either bacterial, fungal, or virus, I think, for the ones that we're asking you about. And so you're going to read through it and then tell us what type of agent it is for each of these different diseases. And then lastly, just a little reflection response about epidemiologists. So that is what part 1 looks like. Part 2 will be very, very similar. It'll just have the other infectious agents that you don't cover today. So that is it. I hope you guys are having a good day. I have a new little setup in my bedroom, so I can close the door and record things without my kids coming in, and get a little work done. But right outside, you can see, right outside across the street from us, we have we have a bunch of goats. I know there's goats down in Rockland right now too, all over the neighborhoods. But we took a walk yesterday. Look how cute those baby goats are. So cute. So there's a bunch of goats across from our lot right now. I like this guy trying to reach up. Trying to reach up and get those leaves. But anyways, had to close the window last night because if you've ever heard a bunch of goats, they sound kind of like screaming little kids. So I ended up having to close the windows last night when we slept. But they are cute. So I hope you guys have a good day. Get outside, go for a walk, and meet me at our Google Meet at 1:30. I think we're gonna try and play Kahoot. So I will see you there. Bye guys.